Derech Mitzvosecha, Mitzvas Vidui U'Teshuvah, Mitzvah of Confession and Teshuvah. We are learning so far about what exactly is considered the Mitzvah of Vidui and Teshuvah. We saw from Sefer Chinuch that Vidui is its own mitzvah, and the confession is its own mitzvah. It's not something that's reliant necessarily on other things, as in, even when we don't have the sacrifices, we still have the mitzvah. We're not in the land of Israel, we don't have the Beis Hamikdash, etc. We still have the mitzvah of verbal confession because it's its own mitzvah. We see that there's also benefits to verbal confession. For example, when you say it, that shows that you really mean it, that you're truly acknowledging, I recognize what I've done wrong, I recognize that there's an eye that sees and an ear that hears, etc. And that also when you say it, it's going to fortify you. So there are benefits to it. The bottom line is confession is its own mitzvah. Confession requires verbalization. So what is the mitzvah of teshuvah? Two parts to it. One that's called a ziva sachet, abandoning sin. I will never do this again. I'm done with this. Truly, truly done with this. Required within that is harata, which means regret. That sinking feeling, that feeling of shame, disgust. I can't believe I did that. I remember the day I ever did that is important. It's integral to this process. It doesn't necessarily mean that all day long you have to be walking around in this state of regret, especially if it's going to keep you from functioning. But we do have times of tshuva. We do have times where this is appropriate to sit and go over what you've done. You do it every night. We do it in the day. And we do Atonement, what's called the supplication during davening. There's fast days. There's Yom Kippur. There are times set aside for this full tshuva process. And also, if someone individually decides it's time for me to shape up, you can go through the process. Point is, that feeling is important. It's integral to it. So even someone who's, let's say, more stoic, and they say, okay, I'm never doing that behavior again, and there might not be a deep emotion involved in their decisions because they're more of a stoic, they still have to have a measure of regret. And it's just going to counterbalance because maybe when they transgress as a stoic, they didn't have that much pleasure necessarily in the transgression. Like, okay, I did this, I did this. It might not need the same level of emotion to undo it, but there still has to be this regret. The charata has to be there. You do the verbal confession, and then, finally then, we can ask for forgiveness. We need to go through the steps of the process first, and the process must be processed. We must have the process done correctly for everything to happen correctly. Tanya describes for us fasting and affliction. These are additives. They're not specifically integral to tshuva. Tshuva could happen without it. Again, these could add to it, but the process can still process without these necessarily. Every action that we do creates a form, a body is created, and then whatever emotion we had, ultimately everything goes back to pleasure. So whatever pleasure we had at the time created a life spark within that body and form. So it's not just that we want to cut off the life supply that we sent in the wrong direction, we also want to undo what was done. It's not enough to say, okay, never mind, I'm not going to create any more sin bodies and not give them life anymore. I also want to be able to destroy what was created. I want to take it back. I want them to go back to the state of nothingness. Action counteracts action, and emotion counteracts emotion. The pleasure I felt is countered by the regret that I feel, and then the action, in theory, how do you really prove that you've left, that you've abandoned sin, you're never going to go there again? If you would be in the exact same situation, you don't go there again. That's full proof of, okay, I'm not going to do it anymore. It's easy to say if you're not in that situation, but what if we're in the exact situation? Now's when the real test is of you not to do that anymore. But God in His kindness says movement of the lips, verbalization counts as an action. I'm not necessarily going to require you all the time to actually relive the situation to prove yourself. So if everything else is done sincerely, then I will take the movement of the lips as the counteraction. So this is one great kindness that God has done for us. Then we saw Rambam describing the things with Vidui. We come to the question of how is it that a Jewish person, how can we affect this? What is it about what we're doing that affects this whole process? Why does it work the way it works? The thing we have to understand, mitzvos are called mitzvahs havaya. So the mitzvahs are connected to this name of havaya. You have the Ein Sof, God's essence, which is so far beyond the world and beyond understanding. We don't really get it. We don't even have terms for it. We can only say, well, it's infinite. That's the best we've got. It wills a world. It wants the world to exist. But the same way we need sun, you don't just take a slice of the sun and then core of the sun and drop it in the middle of the earth. That would not help. That would not be very good for the earth. Instead, there has to be a process of sending that light down to us in a way that we could take it in. The Ein Sof, you have God's essence. We can't take in the essence. There's this aspect of God, this creative aspect of God, this name of Havaya, where the whole power of creation comes from. And it goes through a very structured system to send the light down into the world. And that structured system that we see in its preliminary format of it, but we see here the 10 attributes, the 10 spheres they call the world of Atzilus. So it goes through these attributes, for lack of a better word. Wisdom, understanding, knowledge, all the things that we saw. The 3 intellectual, 6 emotive, and then Malchus, kingship. We call these attributes, God relates to the world through them. God relates to the world through kindness. God relates to the world through strength, through harmony, compassion, these things. We've discussed this before, how everything in creation can trace back to one of these attributes. In Michamocha, we saw how everything goes back to the angels. But even the angels are rooted within these attributes. Because everything comes back to these. Remember, we say water spreads out. Water is like kindness. So water is wired according to the nature of kindness. Fire, it's a self-contained, right? Only if wind acts upon a fire. But fire in general is something that burns upward. So it's like the self-discipline, the strength, the whole force kind of thing. So fire is rooted in Gvura. Gvura is Malach Gavriel, that's the angel Gabriel. Michal is like kindness, that's the angel Michael. Everything is wired according to one of these attributes. When we do a mitzvah, we draw down God's life creative force through the attributes. And here we have it in the first world of Atzilus, but then we know there are worlds after it. And we bring it down until we get to our world, that we can have this life that gives light and life to the world. world. This creative aspect that comes to the world and enlivens it and nurtures it is very good for the world, for us to bring this down. Same way we want sunlight, we want to keep bringing down the sunlight, we want to keep bringing down the name of Havaya, we want to keep feeding this life and light into the world. How do we do it? Through mitzvahs. Why through mitzvahs? Mitzvahs are related to the name Havaya, so they're in that source there, and because this is the reason the whole world was created, for Torah mitzvahs. That's why God created the world. Everything that exists either helps us or challenges us in the fulfillment of Torah mitzvahs. So when we do what we're supposed to, we draw the light down. How is it that a Jew could draw the light down? Because remember, Shema Yisrael Havaya Elokeinu, our nature is Havaya also. So we are sourced also in Havaya. Unlike the angels, they come from the name of Elokim. They're coming from a different aspect of God. It's a more external aspect of God. There are parts of you that we say, oh, it's so you, these things. But are they really the real you? We would change it. Are you still you? Yeah, because the core of you, there might be iconic things about you that would relate to you, but the core of you is the real you. Not these other parts of you. They're kind of just external features, depending how far it goes, as far as your personality and moving outward till your physical features. That's what we mean by going external versus internal. So the name of Elokim is one step removed from the essence. Havaya is closely related to essence. That's where we're sourced. So we can affect the flow of mitzvos because that's where our neshama comes from. When we do everything we're supposed to do, all the flow works beautifully. It all works correctly. If, God forbid, we do what we're not supposed to do, then not only do we interrupt the flow, but we actually channel it in another direction. The example is, I was with my brother and sister-in-law and the kids. When I was in New York, we went to, there's a science museum. I don't remember what it's called, in Queens. So they have there on one of the floors, they have these massive LED screens that take up the whole walls. It's supposed to be mimicking like an ecological system. They're very interactive screens. It's very cool. The focal point of it is a massive waterfall. See the water coming down, the water spreads out to the different topographical type regions, whatever the word is. There's like a lake over here, and here I think there's like swamp or like agriculture or whatever. There's different parts. So for example, you could stand there and you could hold your hand out and you could catch a seed and you could put it in the ground and then it grows and you see how everything works. And here you have a lake. You could go fishing on the lake and you could actually see the water level of the lake gets affected by the waterfall. The water come down. You see that water affects the water level of the lake. So if you stop it, then you see the water level of the lake drops down. Everything is screen, an interactive screen, but on the floor is also screen because you can see the water coming down from the waterfall. But on the floor, there's these two long pieces that are supposed to look like logs. So you could take those logs and position them and they can redirect the flow of the water. It's very cool. But what are we getting at here? All the water's coming down and it's feeding everything exactly how it needs. But what happens if now I create an impediment to it? It's not just that I block the water from going to the lake so I see the water level lowers. That water is now going to go somewhere else. And wherever it's going to go, if it's going to the wrong place, it's going to be something that is harmful. It's going to be something that is not good. So if too much water ends up in the agriculture area, it's going to flood the region and then we're not going to have agriculture. When they put the logs there, the water gets redirected. And you can see the impact of how much water is coming in on these different regions. So we're drawing the light, the Mitzvahs Havaya, we're drawing on the light of Havaya. That's the process. Because we're sourced there, we can bring it down from there. When we do what we're supposed to do, everything is healthy and everything's being fed the way it's supposed to. But if God forbid we do what we're not supposed to do, it's not just, oh, you've created a blockage. It's not just a blockage. Person, they don't just create a blockage, they actually start sending the light into a different direction. And where does the light go when it's not going the way it's supposed to? It goes to the negative forces. The negative forces, God basically keeps them on life support. They're literally a necessary evil. You're only here because there's going to be choice, so there can be reward, and the opposite of reward is going to be the punishment then for not doing what you're supposed to do. That's the only reason why you're here. I don't want you here, but you're a necessity. So God says I give you the scraps. However, I make a deal with you. When there's going to be quote unquote wayward light, when there's going to be light that's going in the wrong direction, you could grab onto that and you could go get that. If you ever see those pictures of the leeches, after they feed and they glut up, they blow up, disgusting. That's kind of what these negative forces are like. Okay, they can't take it in the same way, but the negative forces, they grab that light. Now, the person, when they realize what's happened, they're like, oh, not only do I want to get the light moving in the right direction, but I want to take it back. I don't want the leech to have it. I don't want to take it back. When the process of teshuvah is done correctly, we can actually take it back. We don't just stop it. We don't just put all the pipes back in order. We actually could take back what was given. So it's part of why the process has to process, because each step of the process going correctly is how we make sure it's a complete and a fixed and correct process. In summary, that's what the Maamar is going to explain the mechanics of that. How does that work and why does that work? And also, the most important point, which we'll get to, the most important point is that it can only work in this world. Because in this world, there's chance for change. In the upper realms, everything is fixed. Your chance to rectify is down here in this world. It's a great kindness that God has done for us that He lets us do this. We learned that when we do a mitzvah, an awakening from below, Sorsa Del Tata, hey God, here we are. Remember you created a world for mitzvahs? Look, we just did the mitzvahs. That wakes God up above. God takes the infinite light, which shouldn't be able to come down to this world. He compresses it, He vacuum packs it, and He sends it down into the world because a wake up down here, we initiate down here, we wake God up above. He's like, yes, I will send them the light and everything will be so beautiful. As long as everything is working correctly, tamim, it is complete. We have a complete healthy body because everything is flowing the way that it's supposed to. Then we saw that the mitzvahs are kind of like clusters, so each mitzvah is connected to a different letter of the name of Havaya. So between all the mitzvahs, they draw down from the letter according to what it is. Again, when we do everything that we're supposed to, we have the complete healthy system. If God forbid not, then we've sent some of that energy into the wrong place. Now that brings us to Tanya Geras HaKodesh, and this is talking about when a person, God God forbid, transgresses and they create this blemish disfigurement in the process. So now the negative forces get that life. So this sustenance of idolaters through the divine spark is also called the exile of the Shekhinah. For this life force, which is in a state of exile within them, stems from the radiance issued to them from the spark of the word of God called Shekhinah. Remember, Shekhinah is the aspect of God that creates the world. That's Malchus, its lowest level. It's a feminine word because women create. They give birth. When we do what we're not supposed to, this light of the Shekhinah goes in the wrong direction. So here's talking about idolaters, people who defy God. When they get this, these negative forces get this, the light is considered to be in a state of exile. Because it doesn't go nowhere. It's a scientific thing that energy never disappears, never gets burned up. It just transfers energy. So it's a reflection of what goes on in spiritual realm. The divine light is coming down. It doesn't just burn up. It gets transferred. It would seem that this state of exile has existed since the creation of the world, with all its impure animals, etc. What do we mean then that the Shekhinah was exiled? How can you say you just sent the Shekhinah into exile? Wasn't it always in exile if there were things that have been prohibited? Since the dawn of time, there are things which have been prohibited, things which we call impure. So now all of a sudden you're saying that the Shekhinah went to exile? What is that supposed to mean? And this exile brought about by the Klippa, deriving their life force from a spark of God's creative speech, stems from the sin of the tree of knowledge and onward. For from that time, Klippa were able to receive a degree of vitality that they did not have until that point. The whole thing with the Chet Eitz Hadas, the sin of the tree of knowledge, is that good and evil got mixed up. Before everything was very clear. Part of what that sin created is it created a mixed up state. We're still having the effects of that now. However, they received the vitality only from the hindmost, i.e. from the lowest and most external dimension of holiness. So God keeps them alive with the least scrappiest scraps of holiness possible. But when the Jewish people were exiled among the nations, and the Jewish people are attached and rooted in the supernal countenance, the panam primus, i.e. the innermost aspect of divinity. So Jewish people, when we go into exile, and because our source is in the innermost part of God, this became a total exile of this. Our sages of Blessed Mary said, when the Jewish people were exiled to Edom, the Shekhinah accompanied them. So when we went into exile, the Shekhinah came with us into exile. Galila Edom Shekhinah Imam. Now we're looking at it in a spiritual sense. What do you mean the Shekhinah gets exiled when you do what you're not supposed to do? Now, though God is one and his name is one, i.e. though his speech and the breath of his mouth, which in the sacred Zohar is referred to as his name, is singular and uniquely one, God is oneness. Now it is known to all that the soul of man, the soul of the Jew, is compounded by the 10th spirit, Chachma Ben Adad, and so on, as explained in the Tanya, part 1, chapter 3. The emotive attribute in one soul of the love and fear of God, and so on, are analogous to the first 6 midot, or divine emotive attributes of the 10th spirit, which are collectively known as Zeir Anpin, literally the minor visage, the minor face, and the faculty of speech in one soul is analogous to the supernal speech, which is known as the sphere of Machot or the Shekhinah. This is going through right now, we're talking about the different attributes of things, is because, as we've learned, we are creating God's image. What does it mean we're creating God's image? Not just on my arm or some pale imitation of his arm, but these attributes are mirrored within us. Because we are rooted in Havaya, our structure is similar to that structure through which Havaya works, which are the 10 attributes as we've seen it. There's the mirroring aspect of these things. Since a Jew's speech is analogous to supernal speech, as in our speech is like God's speech, per se, the attribute of Malchus, which goes out, that's what man is called Medaber. The Shekhinah, when speaking words of Torah, one awakens the supernal speech, the sphere of Malchut. So when we say words of Torah, we wake up God's attribute of speech. Thereby unifying the Shekhinah and linking it to the preceding stages of emanation, we complete the whole process. It's all coming down here, and then we do what we're supposed to do, and now we've linked it all together, and everything's a complete process. Thereby unifying the Shekhinah and linking it to the preceding stages of emanation. That is why it is established that for the reading of Shema, for the blessing after meals, and for the study of words of Torah, one is not discharged his duty by meditation without speech. That's why we have to verbalize. So here's talking about a mitzvah. We must say it, because when we say it, and we are mirroring, we're tapping into God's aspect of speech, and then we create this whole unity system. What we're looking at here right now for our purposes is looking at how a Jewish person, because of the way we're created, we have the ability to tap into this whole system. We can tap into the system, we can complete the system, we have the power to do that. Now, God created this opposite of that. Remember, Zel Umazel, we saw it a lot in Tanya, that there's a balance to the world. Since the entire dynamic of the holy side of the universe has its counterpart in the other side, there's mirror images. The Sitracha, the 10th spirit of holiness, and 10 corresponding faculties of the godly soul, each have their unholy counterpart. These are the 10 crowns of impurity. Remember how we saw the godly soul and the animal soul are created the same way. They're the same, as far as that they have the same attributes. It's the same as there's an intellect in one, there's an intellect in the other. It's almost a fair playing field. You guys all have the same toolkit. Figure it out. Here it's actually called the 10 crowns of impurity because a crown goes on the head. It goes above the body. So this aspect of impurity, it can't fully take in. It can only surround. From these issue the souls of the nations, which are also comprised of the very same 10 levels. All the other people have the same structure in their souls. The exposition of Sefer HaGilgulim on the verse that man rules over man to his detriment is common knowledge. It refers to the mystery of the exile of the Shekhinah in the midst of the Klipot, in order to animate them and to empower them to rule in the present time of exile. As in, man rules over man, thus means that the evil man of Klippa rules over the sacred man, i.e. the holy side of the universe. When the Jewish people went into exile, the Shekhinah went to exile with us. What does that mean in spiritual terms? When a person who is created in God's image, has all these attributes, could complete this whole chain of creation, when they instead do what they're not supposed to do, then man rules over man, the animal aspect, the negative aspect, the Klippa aspect, rules over the holy aspect. So we say that the Shekhinah is going into exile when we behave in a way that is like Edom, as in when we behave in a way that goes against or in defiance of what God wants from us, then that life force feeds the negative forces, and it's in exile, because when something's in exile, it can't be its real self. It can't truly express itself. It's in exile because it's been sent in the wrong direction. How can it be sent in the wrong direction? Because of where we're sourced from, where we're coming from, we have the power to either make sure everything aligns properly, or we have a power actually to impact it for one way or another. So we're learning the mechanics now of everything works, which will feed into the rectification of how we're going to fix this whole situation if we do what we're not supposed to do, God forbid.